take your clingers. Remember, these are the ones that you want to sort of think of as having suction cups on their little stems, and they need a flat wall. Examples would be ivy, Boston ivy, Virginia creeper, trumpet vine, and climbing hydrangea. I'm sure there are many others, but they all pretty much live by the same rules, which is to say, show no mercy. Or something like this might happen. This is English ivy, public enemy number 1. In the Pacific Northwest, we all thought it was great, and then it turned out that it climbs up to the top of trees and smothers them and everything else in its sight. This is English ivy on a house. We call it the Disappearing House Act, and it is now completely covered up with ivy. I think maybe it's a crack house. But there's some nice ones. This is Virginia creeper or perhaps Boston ivy. And it's growing on a concrete wall. Remember, these things need a flat surface to grow on. And even though it's deciduous, I think it has this beautiful, almost looks like lace pattern in the winter. But your Virginia creeper needs a wall about as big as the side of a large building in order to do well. We have a plant psychic that comes to our events at Plant Amnesty called Lawenda, and she tells people's fortunes. And one of the fortunes that she's almost always right about is you have too many vines on too small of a support. Many vines must have a lot of space. But when you buy them, you think to yourself, well, I want it to get up really fast. So I'm just going to put it on the side of my garage or my mailbox post, and it'll get up fast, and then I'll control it with pruning. But you really have to allow a certain amount of space for a plant, and you need to pay very close attention to that plant tag, because no matter how dutiful a pruner you are, you will fail in keeping something much smaller than its adult size. So you look at the plant tag, and if it says 12 feet, double that, and figure that's how much room you need to keep that vine happy. The only well-behaved vine that I see that's very commonly planted is the hydrangea vine. And I like to say it, hydrangea vine. It's suitable for actually growing on a tree, whereas most vines can be trouble. And it actually will work on a fairly small wall, which is to say a 4 to 6 foot tall wall. Like the other plants, it will climb up to the top or try to climb up to the top, but it'll leave a nice framework down below. Hydrangea vine. Here's a hydrangea vine climbing on the side of a fence, and it looks real good, but it's actually starting to pile out and head too far into the shrub bed. And sometimes they get up to the top of your wall, and they kind of race back and forth on the top and build up on themselves, and then start reaching way out. And you want to contain it back to that wall, and it's no problem. You just cut to a node, which is any place there's a couple of side branches, even though they're only about 1/4 inch long. And you also want to chisel and peel it off the wall where you don't want it. Hydrangea vines and also the other clingers can get too far out of hand, or maybe you just need to paint your wall or your fence of your house, and there's this hydrangea vine or some other clinger on it. You can just use your hand pruners to chisel and pry it off, and don't be afraid. It will be just fine. Hydrangea vines, although they're a pretty delicate vine, do take some pretty heavy pruning, and in fact, it's pretty hard to kill a hydrangea by pruning it. Here's the sort of cut you might make if it's coming too far out into your garden beds. It's not a problem, and you can do this pretty much any time of year. I generally wait till after it's through blooming and then nibble at it. You can't do a wholesale cutback or you will lose blooms for a season. So it's better if you just kind of cut it from time to time to make it stay on its fence and not get too piled on top of itself. If it's gotten way, way out of control, you can do a radical renovation and cut it back hard. Just know you'll lose blooms for a while. And this is a trumpet vine. It has a sort of a trumpet-shaped orange, reddish-orange flower, and it can be quite dangerous. It will actually pop up in various parts of your yard. I'm sure this gal just planted it on one wall, and now I have to prune back 5 of these, And you don't prune it back to the size you want it because that's where it starts growing back up. You chisel it way back off the fence, very low, and then let it grow back up. It's hard for people to get that when you want something to be a certain size, you don't cut it to that size. You frequently head it back much farther and buy yourself a few years. Let it kind of go for 2 or 3 years and then chisel it back. Let it go for 2 or 3 years, chisel and pry it back off the wall. You won't hurt what's left. And these are the sorts of tendrils that are on these plants. This also goes for your Boston ivy and any of your other clinging vines. People just tend to cut out the window, and then in 30 seconds, the window's covered over again. So pry it farther back away from the gutter, down way past the window, and give yourself a break. It'll look natural as it grows, and kind of do it uneven so it looks like it just has just gotten to that space and hasn't gotten overgrown yet.